I'm delighted to chat just about all of the pieces that we've been talking about over the last 2 days. And really, one of the things I wanted to bring to mind for all of us, and I mentioned this yesterday as we were getting started, is that I hear from so many people that I'm doing all these things. I'm doing all the self-care and I'm not feeling like myself. Something still feels off. And the thing for us is that we're never just our physical body or just our emotional states that walk into a room or that go into an experience that we're having. It's always the totality of us. And I think in a lot of ways we might not notice, right? Because the thing that might be troubling us or that might not feel great for us sort of tends to take center stage, and sometimes we're picking up on things without knowing what they are or realizing what's going on. And that's the cornerstone for us with intuition, right? Our intuitive self is constantly picking up on what our body is experiencing, what our senses are experiencing, what emotions are coming up for us is impacted by our intuition. And our nervous system is constantly at play. But again, just because we don't necessarily know that that's the full process going on, we often tune it out. And I think so much in our world, we've been rewarded for letting our thinking mind take center stage, that unless it's a logical thought or a linear thought that we can link to something tangible, we often tune it out. But the thing is, when we slow our processes down, when we slow our body down, when we calm our minds, when we slow into that inner energy, that inner grounded, calm version of ourselves, we start to hear, we start to recognize the voice of our intuition. So that's something I'm often passionate about helping my clients anchor back into. And one thing I've often heard is, oh, but that's magical and that's mystical and that's way out there and woo woo. But what we've been seeing in more recent years, actually a couple of decades now, is that there is a lot of neuroscientific backing for intuitive processes. So I want to welcome you all to just talking a little bit about that. I will say that I'm going to share quite a bit about our brain, but there will be no pop quiz, I promise. And there's no need to memorize the terms or the processes. I just think it helps us organize information when we have the language for it. So the information will be shared for you guys, but I really want you to just take it in, okay? So let's go ahead. I do have a screen share for us. So I might miss a couple of things in the chat while I have that up. Please forgive me, but I will check back in with the chat. All right, so you should be able to see my slides here. But I will move it. Okay, good. All right, so intuition and neuroscience, something that, again, I am passionate about sharing with people, because when we talk about intuition, a lot of people imagine that it's something mystical, it's something, that's magical at play, but it really isn't magic. It's our brain and our body at work. And as we learn to tune in more consistently, we'll figure out some practical ways that we can connect with that inner guidance. So let's look at what intuition actually is. When we speak of intuition, it's those subtle feelings that we might have, those nudges, those hunches, some things that we often experience in our body. Maybe it's just that slight ding in our body. I know for me, there's often a ding that I might experience, and it's hard to notice unless I'm aware of it, right? So there might be a tension, there might be lightness, or just sometimes curiosity. And our neuroscience shows that our prefrontal cortex and something called our insula are constantly scanning for patterns. And our body is sending signals to guide our decision making processes. Okay, so intuition's not a mystical process, it's our brain and body collaborating. Right. Ashley mentioned the frontal lobe yesterday, talking a little bit about the tarot. The insula is known as the brain and body bridge because it integrates our internal body signals, right? Something called interoceptive awareness, right? That's our awareness of what's happening in our body. It integrates the signals from our body with emotional and cognitive processing. So it's basically how our brain listens to our body. I like to think of it as the translator between our body's wisdom and our brain's awareness. Okay, so let's continue on. So, our research that includes fMRI studies demonstrates that intuition is an actual brain process. Again, our prefrontal cortex takes in information without our full awareness, and our insula, that translator, that brain body bridge, monitors our brain, our bodily signals. Um, so, our brain is constantly tuning in and scanning. And recently, Harvard researchers noted that intuition is actually one of the key players in decision making strategies. So essentially, our brain is constantly weighing data, and our body is providing cues that help us navigate our decisions, right? So the insula, that bridge, is like this internal dashboard, constantly taking things in, things like our heartbeat, like our breath, the tension in our belly, in our muscles. And this is actually why intuition often shows up as a gut feeling for many people, or just a tightness in our chest. Or the flip side, right? When there's a sense of ease, something we hear just leaves us feeling comfortable and open and soothed. So, our brain is actually integrating these signals into our awareness, and sometimes before we can even put it into words. Okay, so the insula also helps us generate subjective feelings. That sense, for example, like I mentioned, of that gut feeling or being moved by something that we hear, right? So, our insula is linked deeply to our body, which is also linked to our emotions. Okay, so let me just share one other study. Studies show that our insula lights up for us when people are making decisions based on instinct or a gut feeling rather than logical calculations. So this shows us that our intuition's showing up in our brain, not just the space of making decisions from this rational reasoning perspective. So it's actually helpful for us to notice our internal states, right? Things like mindfulness, our emotional regulation, and even compassion practices for us, because that then allows us, much like we've been doing this weekend, to anchor back into our body so that we can start to tune in more comfortably, more clearly. Okay, so the other thing I like to point out here is that every single one of us has a brain, right? Which might be stating the obvious, but I say that because the that means every single one of us then has the ability or the capacity to work intuitively, to tune into our intuition, to guide our day to day, and maybe even the broader things as well that we want to tap into our intuition for. Now, what's the problem, right? Like, what challenges do we run into with that, right? Because I hear from people often that, oh, I can't really, I have no idea what my intuition tells me. I try to tune in, but I don't know. Well, one reason for that, that one big challenge is that in our busy overstimulated lives, our signals are often drowned out, right? We might ignore them, or we might just misattribute them to stress or random thoughts. And learning to tune back in helps us honor the brain at work and reconnect with our inner wisdom. it helps us tune back into what that voice sounds like for us. Okay. So I want to just pause here and invite everyone to just do a quick practice, just a very brief 2-minute practice here. And go ahead and let yourself be comfortable in your seat. You can go ahead and close your eyes if you'd like. And we'll just take a few deep breaths. And an invitation here to ask yourself a simple question, maybe like, what should I tackle first today? Or what should I have for lunch? And now notice any sensations in your body. You might notice a pull, maybe some tension, or maybe a sense of ease. When you're ready, you can go ahead and jot it down, but without judgment. That's often one of the pieces that slows down our ability to just kind of anchor back in, is that we might have an experience, right? We might notice a sensation, but we might dismiss it, or we might berate ourselves for it, or decide, that doesn't make sense, right? We end up invalidating ourselves. But tuning back in and just allowing it to be there without judgment is one of the first steps towards strengthening that intuitive muscle. So we can come back when we're ready. Does anyone want to share? Okay. Let me just check in and see if there are any hands or questions. Okay. So let's continue forward. One thing I'll say here is that consistent attention to these signals. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a few chat items. Um, okay. Lisa shared that she had a chill with her question. Absolutely. And working in the spiritual world, sometimes we often talk about the chills are a really great signal for us that there's an intuitive process happening. We often refer to them as the spirit chills too. And Deborah shared that there was noticing deeper breathing. Beautiful signals there. Absolutely. Thank you guys for sharing. So, the consistent practice for us noticing these things instead of shutting them down, instead of just sort of shrugging them off, is part of what's going to help make it easier for us to keep noticing those signals. And it starts to be a part of our decision making much more automatically. Okay. I like to say it's not about perfection, it's about noticing the whispers that we often ignore. So I want to talk also. I mentioned interoception a couple minutes, and I'm mindful of the time, but I'll talk just briefly about the body as our compass. Um, our bodies are incredible instruments. I have a lot of gratitude for all of our physical bodies. Again, it's not just our physical bodies that accompany us into anything that we do. And interoception is at the heart of that. Interoception refers to our ability to sense our internal state. This is what helps distinguish intuition from stress. I hear from a lot of people, I have no idea if that was just my scared thoughts or if that's an inner voice talking. Well, one, as we learn to hear and recognize the voice of our intuition, we get a little bit more clear on that. And two, as we tune into our internal states and we start noticing when we're a little bit maybe off or out of neutral or in that stress state, that's when we can start to tell, wait, this is the voice of fear coming through, or thoughts from fear coming through, or anxiety or overwhelm, right? As opposed to that intuitive voice. So when we're calm, our intuitive signals are much clearer. When we're stressed, they can get lost in that noise. And so paying attention to the subtle cues in our bodies is one big key to reconnecting with our inner guidance. And that's a big part of why this weekend's practices are so important for us. They help us to deactivate the brain's alarm signal so that we can tune into our body in the here and now instead of just sort of what's going on in that hyper alert mode for us. Okay. And with that, I also want to share one overlooked ingredient often in tuning into our intuition is our self compassion. When we judge ourselves for not knowing or not being good enough or overreacting or whatever it might be, and we then dismiss our inner signals, our stress system is activated, right? Our cortisol rises, our prefrontal cortex activity kind of slows down, and it makes it harder to notice those subtle cues from the body. And we do have research by Neff and Germer that shows that when we practice self compassion, we actually reduce that stress, we lower the cortisol, and we increase the neurochemicals that help us feel more connected, a little bit more upbeat, like oxytocin and serotonin. This then translates to safety in our nervous system. It's in that space of safety that we start to hear our intuition. So without that self compassion, our inner critic drowns out those subtle signals. But with self compassion, the whispers of intuition can finally be heard, start to be recognized. And one practice I recommend for people is a daily self compassion practice of journaling, just kind of being and bringing in an invitation each day. And so, with that said, I do have a self compassion digital journal for you guys. You will be getting a promo code for a discount with that in our deliverables. And I'm mindful of the time, so I'm just going to move forward a little bit. And I will go into just very briefly. Ashley talked to us a little bit about the tarot yesterday. So I want to add to it that Carl Jung, who was a pioneer in psychology, talked about the intuition as being the psyche's way of communicating with itself. And so tools that are like tarot journaling or even just symbolic reflections help to reveal patterns for us and help us to start tuning back into our intuitive senses sometimes, right? While we're working to connect with our inner wisdom. And I'll offer a practical application for us. One way that we can get started with this for us daily is to just pause and take a breath before making a decision, which is what we did a few minutes ago together. Then we want to check in with our body. Notice if there's any tension, any ease or opening that might happen. And one good guideline is if we start noticing some contraction, that might be a signal that we might want to kind of just tune into our body and see what needs are being communicated. But if we notice some opening and expansion, that's a good opportunity to just notice that, you know what, my body feels safe. My nervous system is sending signals of safety here. And then we want to reflect with symbols, right? Symbolically, whether it's journaling, whether it's drawing, or we can work with tarot or other cards. And from there, that's where we can then pause and observe what's going on for us to integrate all of that information. So I'll share that as an invitation for you guys, because the more consistently that we practice noticing the signals, the stronger that flow of that intuitive muscle can become. Decisions start to feel lighter and more aligned. We get a little bit more comfortable just knowing how we feel about something, what we think of something. And the key is regular attention, right? Not necessarily perfection. And remember that our thinking mind is going to want to know why, but we want to practice just allowing the knowing to be there, the sensations and the not the awareness to be there, right? Over time, we'll better understand what that voice of our intuition is looking to communicate. But we can get started with small, everyday choices and see what arises for us. Okay? And so, what I'd like to just kind of leave you with is that our intuition is quite magical, but it is not magic, right? It's the elegant dance of our brain, our body, and our emotions working together to guide you. And when we weave in self compassion, we change our neurochemistry and we create the conditions to hear those whispers much more clearly. And this is something everyone is wired for. And it's something we can practice, strengthen, and learn to trust. Okay. So I'll pause there with that information and just check the chat. Um, Denise, thank you. Denise shared this was enlightening and gratitude that there are a number of things I want to research and learn more about. Absolutely. And with that, I'll take that as a segue to just kind of talk about the next steps. I'm aware of our time, so I won't keep you guys. But I just want to thank you all for being here. And what I'd like to offer for you guys is that over the next couple of days, you will still feel the benefit and the impact of all of these practices, all of this knowledge, because often what our brain is doing, our nervous system, is still processing and integrating information, right? So it's at work. And it's about 3 to 5 days that our brain is just going to kind of process things. So, for that reason, I will be sharing our recordings in the coming couple of days because I really want you to just be present with the experience of this bigger, louder dose to kind of anchor into. And I'm also going to encourage you as you do that, see what naturally you're guided towards, what intuitive messages through your body, through your emotions are coming through. So I'm going to look at the chat here. Rebecca shared, it's so great to be reminded how natural intuition is. Thank you so much for that wisdom. Thank you, Rebecca. I love that. Absolutely. I think often it's sort of regarded as like this woo-woo thing that's over there, but we all actually experience it. It's just learning to recognize it again. And Veronica, thank you so much for your comment. Um, Namaste to you as well. So I love talking about these things. I love practicing these things. I think you guys could see I'm very blessed to have incredible people around me to share this with. And I was delighted to share these things with you. The next steps are if you want more of this, I have a couple of opportunities for you.